My family missed my husband's funeral while I sat by myself in the front row, staring at the casket carrying the love of my life. My parents and sister were 300 miles away raising champagne glasses at a luxury resort. My mother actually sent me a text saying a funeral was too upsetting for them to attend on my sister's birthday. They believed they could simply brush aside my grief to preserve their celebration. But right in the middle of the eulogy, as tears rolled down my cheeks, the silent chapel was interrupted by my phone vibrating non-stop against the wooden pew. 44 missed calls. Then a panicked message from my mother appeared. "Call me now. Something has gone terribly wrong." They picked a party over my husband's memory, but that one desperate phone call was about to completely destroy them. Stay with me until the end, to witness the ultimate karma unfold. My name is Violet, and I am 33 years old. People say grief has a way of peeling back your life until only the raw truth is left. But I never imagined the truth about my own family could be this heartless. The air inside the small funeral chapel felt heavy, filled with the fragrance of lilies and the crushing weight of my reality. I sat completely alone in the very first row. My hands shook as my fingers firmly held the edge of the dark wooden pew. Just a few feet ahead rested the polished mahogany casket carrying David, my husband, my strength, and the man who had loved me without conditions for more than 10 years. He had been taken from me in the blink of an eye, a sudden medical emergency stealing him away before we even had the chance to say goodbye. You would think that during a moment like this, your family would be the shield keeping you standing through the storm. But when I looked at the empty seats beside me, the heartbreaking truth settled in. No one in my family came to my husband's funeral. My mother, Eleanor, my father, Richard, and my younger sister, Vanessa, were 300 miles away. They didn't miss it because of a tragedy or a canceled flight. They deliberately chose Vanessa's luxury 30th birthday celebration instead. To them, my lifelong mourning was simply an inconvenience to their weekend of sipping champagne at a 5-star resort. My own mother had texted me just before the service began, casually explaining that coming to the chapel would be too depressing for everyone, and that David would have wanted them to enjoy Vanessa's special day. They believed they could simply wipe away my grief to protect their celebration, completely unaware that their casual cruelty was about to set off an avalanche that would destroy them forever. To truly understand how my own family could abandon me during the darkest moment of my life, you have to understand the toxic pattern that had been growing for years. Vanessa had always been the golden child. In my parents' eyes, the world revolved around whatever she wanted, while I was expected to be the quiet, dependable daughter who never asked for anything. Vanessa's luxurious lifestyle, her designer wardrobe, and even the boutique consulting company she managed were all part of a carefully balanced house of cards. But what my family never openly admitted was who was truly paying for that illusion. It wasn't my parents' modest retirement savings, and it definitely wasn't Vanessa's struggling business ventures. It was David and me. David was a brilliant self-made entrepreneur, but he was also incredibly humble. He kept his real net worth private, choosing to live comfortably without showing off his wealth. But because he loved me, he quietly stepped in every time my parents came pleading with another emergency. Over the years, we paid their medical expenses, covered Vanessa's business losses, and cleared credit card balances they couldn't handle. They gladly accepted our money, yet they treated David like an outsider, nothing more than an ATM feeding their greed. They wore their fake pride like armor, looking down on my quiet husband with passive-aggressive remarks while secretly draining him financially. They assumed the flow of money would never end, taking his generosity completely for granted. They had no clue that by abandoning his memory for a weekend of undeserved luxury, they were cutting off the only lifeline keeping them afloat. The silence inside the chapel was interrupted only by the gentle ticking of the wall clock and the muffled crying of David's closest friends. The atmosphere felt like a delicate glass dome of shared grief, and I was doing everything I could to keep from breaking apart completely. Just as Marcus, David's lifelong best friend and business partner, stepped to the podium to deliver the eulogy. A sudden vibration broke my concentration. It wasn't just one buzz. My phone, lying face down on the wooden pew beside my black handbag, started vibrating frantically. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I quickly picked it up, my heart pounding, and turned it over to silence it, expecting some random notification. Instead, my eyes grew wide with disbelief. The screen was overflowing with alerts, 44 missed calls, every single one from my mother. Before I could even make sense of 44 missed calls during a funeral they claimed was too depressing to attend, another text message flashed across the screen. It was a frantic, caps-locked paragraph from Eleanor. "Call me now. Something has gone terribly wrong. We are stranded." Shaking, I quietly slipped out of the pew and walked into the empty marble-floored lobby of the chapel. My grief was instantly overtaken by a wave of icy anger. When I called her back, my mother didn't ask how I was coping. She didn't ask about David. Instead, her voice cut through the line, sharp and frantic, competing with the distant crash of ocean waves and a hotel clerk shouting in the background. Their glamorous weekend had suddenly turned into a complete legal disaster. The five-star resort had unexpectedly declined every one of Vanessa's credit cards, and just outside the gleaming glass entrance, the luxury sports car she had rented for her grand arrival was being fastened onto the back of a repossession truck. As my mother's panicked voice poured through the phone, a sudden, unsettling realization came over me. David had never been blind to the way my family treated me, nor was he unaware of their endless greed. For years, I tried to keep the peace, making excuses for their sense of entitlement, but David saw through every bit of their manipulation. He had always been several steps ahead of everyone in business, and as it turned out, he used that same sharp judgment in our personal lives. Months before his unexpected death, when his health first became uncertain, David quietly met with his legal team to review our finances. He understood that if anything ever happened to him, my family wouldn't come together to support me. They would instantly swoop in like vultures to tear apart everything he had worked so hard to build. Without saying a word to me, hoping to spare me the pain of confronting my family's true character, David completely reorganized his corporate empire and personal assets. He carefully removed my parents' names from the authorized user lists on the corporate accounts they had secretly been treating like their own personal bank accounts. He officially canceled the high-limit credit cards that Vanessa regularly maxed out for her boutique business under the excuse of temporary operating loans. Most importantly, he moved every single dollar from our shared holdings into a heavily protected private trust, naming me the sole executor and beneficiary. The moment the official death certificate was processed by the banks that morning, a prearranged automated trigger instantly cut off every outside financial connection. My family wasn't simply dealing with a temporary problem at their five-star resort. David had built a permanent legal barrier around our wealth, making sure they would never exploit his legacy again. Standing in the quiet chapel lobby, listening to my mother panic, my grief transformed into something solid and unbreakable. "Violet, you have to fix this right now," Eleanor screamed through the phone, every trace of fake sympathy completely gone. "The resort manager is threatening to call the police if we don't pay the bill, and Vanessa is having a complete panic attack in the lobby because they took the keys to the Mercedes. We need you to wire $50,000 to Vanessa's account immediately to cover the charges and save us from this humiliation." I let the silence linger, until the only thing I could hear was her frantic, heavy breathing. For 22 years, I had watched David give everything to a family that couldn't even respect him enough to attend his funeral. Finally, I found my voice, and it was steadier than it had ever been. "No," I replied softly. "What do you mean, no?" My mother gasped in outrage. "Your sister's entire reputation is at stake. How can you be this selfish?" "What is selfish?" I answered, my voice slicing through her panic like ice. "Skipping my husband's funeral because a chapel was too depressing for your luxury vacation?" "David is gone, Mom, And with him, your undeserved lifestyle is gone as well. You aren't dealing with a banking mistake. David's legal team has already put a complete freeze on every trust fund, credit card, and allowance you've been draining because of your extensive financial misconduct. The gravy train has officially come to an end. Do not call me again. I ended the call and blocked her number immediately, leaving them to deal with the public humiliation they had completely brought upon themselves. The aftermath of that phone call was nothing less than a total collapse for my family. Without David's quiet financial support holding up their illusions, their fragile house of cards fell apart within weeks. Vanessa's boutique consulting firm, which had been losing money for more than a year, filed for bankruptcy almost immediately after her high-limit credit cards were permanently canceled. My parents, unable to handle the enormous debts they had piled up under the belief that our wealth would always rescue them, were forced to make drastic cuts. They sold their suburban home at a huge loss just to stop debt collectors from taking everything they had left, moving into a small, worn-down apartment on the edge of the city. Desperate and furious over their sudden loss of status, they tried launching a vicious smear campaign against me. Vanessa uploaded tearful videos online, claiming I was a heartless older sister who had abandoned her own grieving family during a time of crisis. My mother called distant relatives, portraying me as a greedy widow who was selfishly keeping David's estate out of spite. But they forgot one important detail: I had proof. When the public backlash started coming my way, I didn't hide. I simply took a deep breath and publicly shared the exact text messages my mother had sent me on the morning of the funeral, the ones clearly stating that David's farewell was too depressing to attend and that Vanessa's birthday celebration came first. The public reaction changed instantly and completely. The internet turned against them, destroying Vanessa's social media reputation and leaving my parents completely isolated, forced to face the painful consequences of their own greed. 3 months have passed since that unforgettable day, and the silence in my life is no longer weighed down by grief. It is peaceful. I have used David's legacy to begin a completely new chapter, leaving behind the toxicity of my past and creating a quiet, meaningful life that truly honors his memory. His foresight didn't just protect my finances, it gave me the courage to stand firmly on my own. Now, I would love to hear from all of you who stayed with my story until the very end. If your own family treated you with that level of cruelty and disrespect, would you have helped them out of that hotel disaster, or would you have let them deal with the consequences of their own decisions? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to mention the city you're watching from, so I can see how far David's story has traveled across the world. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm leaving 2 more incredible story scripts on the final screen that will definitely surprise you. Stay strong, and goodbye.